I will have two themes, two simple messages over the next several minutes. The first theme is to talk from a NATO perspective about the security climate that we find ourselves in the first years of the 21st century. And in this regard, I'd like to talk about the relationship between deterrence and values and ambitions. I will try to weave together these three elements. The second of my two messages will be to talk about the importance of public debate on the issue of nuclear weapons, and also the importance of public debate more generally in terms of security. We vastly need to reach out in terms of public diplomacy, all of us, to younger generations so that they understand what is at stake in terms of security challenges to all of us. First, what is the security environment of the 21st century seen from Brussels, where I work? But I believe we will all share many of these strands. There is a persistence, unfortunately, of regional conflicts which we have not solved. Indeed, that have been exacerbated over the last 20 years. There are emerging security challenges such as cyber threats and potential blockages of energy, which now seem more present clearly than 20 years ago. There are, most tragically for the people concerned, a number of weak and failed states and failing states, together with the growing capabilities of non-state actors who exploit this weakness. This is both tragic and a sign of the international community's inability to resolve these fundamental problems. All of these issues continue to be a source of instability. And there has also been, and this brings me to the theme of the weekend, a proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and particularly the means of delivery in terms of ballistic missiles. The conventional wisdom is, and I believe you'll all agree with me, conventional wisdom is that no one is going to attack any of the 28 NATO nations with conventional forces. But NATO retains a robust defense and deterrence posture. Why? So that it can protect and promote some of the values that we all share within the 28 member nations. Values such as human rights and democracy, so that when we engage in the world, we engage today on the basis of strong defense, deterrence posture, so that we are free to assist in what is the international community's efforts and responsibility to promote human rights and indeed democracy, the values that underpin the alliance. Turning now to nuclear weapons. All NATO leaders share the vision, as articulated by US President Obama in Prague, of a world, one day, without nuclear weapons. Everyone shares that. It was reiterated again at the summit in Chicago this year. But we also know that a certain number of conditions must be set before we reach this. Conditions which are not unrelated to what philosopher Kant talked about many, many years ago. These conditions will be met in a measured and potentially very long process to arrive at the goal of no nuclear weapons in the world we live in. Now, one of the conditions which has not yet been evoked is the importance of verifiable termination of proliferation efforts by states who flaunt their non-proliferation treaty obligations and responsibilities. These are unpredictable and provocative states currently developing weapons or weapons-grade uranium. This is clearly one of the first conditions in the road towards a world without nuclear weapons, that we in the international community enforce the treaties and the international law which require people to move down this road. The second condition, which is more difficult to put a label on, is that the international community will work, for example, as we have been in Afghanistan, to ensure that non-state actors do not create a space where they can develop weapons that would hurt hundreds, thousands, potentially tens of thousands of people, as was the case of the time they were given in Afghanistan. We have to work to ensure that there are no safe havens anywhere in the world for terrorists who would choose to use such weapons, or indeed the very blunt technology that underpins the weapons. I'd like to talk now a little bit about what NATO's been doing in this area of deterrence and values. NATO has contributed significantly to creating greater stability in Afghanistan and has enabled progress on all fronts in that country over the last 10 years. As we turn now in 2013 and in 2014 to hand over all of the security responsibilities in that country to the Afghan National Security Forces, we believe that the world community and the NATO nations have made a great move forward. We cannot envisage a world where there will be no heavy weapons if terrorists have the type of safe haven that they were allowed to develop in a country such as Afghanistan. But in a similar fashion, this is where I would like to talk a little bit about this link between defense, deterrence, and values. We also need to understand, I believe, that organizations such as NATO have a role to play in promoting democracy or democratic opportunity, as was the case in Libya. NATO, indeed, in carrying out the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1973 last year to protect civilians in Libya, made an important contribution to the broader effort of anchoring democracy in North Africa and the Middle East. Something we all want to see flourish, and sometimes, unfortunately, it requires a very forceful coup de pouce. It's interesting to see also that what happened last year in Libya, which was a very difficult operation to undertake, has served the United Nations well. The responsibility to protect doctrine, developed and finalized in the United Nations as recently as 2005, has been given real meaning because of the operation in Libya, where the international community, in many ways through NATO operations, was able to assist in the very difficult task of protecting civilians. This is a promise for the future because it has built a strong bridge between NATO, which is a regional organization, and the United Nations, which is the global organization. I quote now from a statement made by Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, who represents, of course, 195 very different, very diverging interests in the world. What did he say about this operation when it was completed? This military operation done by the NATO forces was strictly within Resolution 1973. Now, despite the views expressed in the United Nations Security Council by large nations since then, despite the sometimes provocative statements that have been made to the press and to the international community, given the situation in Syria, that statement remains as an important commitment for further work between NATO and the United Nations in the future. This was something we could do because we had a strong defense organization. I'd like to refer to what Des Brown's just said and pick up a point also under strong European leadership. The press has consistently called this an operation where the United States led from behind. It was very much initially a European initiative, supported strongly by Canada. This, I think, is the future where Europeans see themselves playing a role in their own neighborhood with the support of a large organization such as NATO. So I have tried to state that there are conditions for disarmament in the world, and I believe that NATO is contributing in its small way to some of those conditions. We are reducing drastically our own nuclear weapon stockpiles. We have stated very clearly, for the record, the reduced salience, the reduced importance of nuclear weapons, and we are contributing, as I've just said, to democratic possibilities and the fight against an insurgency which continues in Afghanistan, an insurgency which tramples human rights and which has no regard for real democratic values. All of this goes in the same roadmap towards creating the conditions where one day we will be able to get rid of nuclear weapons. My second message regarding debate. I'd like to thank again the organizers for organizing a debate like the one we'll participate in this weekend. It is no small task. I've organized such debates myself, and I know that they are time-consuming and onerous to put in place. But debate is at the heart of every democracy, and NATO, which is a family of democracies, is open to very contentious debate, and we have tried to promote it. Let me be clear. Thousands of students come to NATO headquarters every year. Many of them with preconceived, young, and idealistic ideas about the world. We try to listen to them, but also talk through some of the complex challenges that parliamentarians have to face in their accountability. We've organized seminars such as this, drawing upon the scientific community to talk about some of the options for facing the challenges of terrorism and other conflicts. We have drawn together, and here again referred to something which Des Brown was referring to. We bring together the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, which is an assembly of NATO parliamentarians, to be briefed on issues such as missile defense. It is true that often they don't carry this back into their parliaments, but we hope that they have a better understanding of some of the issues at hand through debate in NATO. We bring journalists to NATO tours in Afghanistan, so that the journalists who remain totally free to express their views on what they see in Afghanistan can at least do so once they've spent a solid week there seeing what's going on in the ground. In concluding, we believe that NATO has a clear and important story to tell. I look forward to a very rich and animated discussion over the next 2 days. I also look forward to making some new friends here in Dubrovnik, and I hope very much that the conclusions which will be drawn together at the end of the seminar will be conclusions which are forward-looking and which are pragmatic, and that I can bring back as impulse for further work. Distinguished colleagues, it's a real pleasure to be here. NATO is a nuclear alliance, but I think, as you've seen, we're very confident. I certainly believe that we must be confident in discussing these issues. All of the leaders of NATO see one day a world where there will be no nuclear weapons. President Obama has said that very explicitly, and I think it's all of our work now to identify the means to make that a reality. Thank you very much.